Well, good morning, everyone. It was a wonderful first day yesterday, and I have the privilege of kicking us off here on day 2. For the last year, I've had the privilege of being a member of the Strategic Planning Committee of CII and working very closely with our next speaker. In that time, I've had the opportunity to see someone who has a vision for where he wants the organization to go, and that vision is what he's going to share with us this morning. So without further ado, I'd like to ask to come to the stage Dr. Stephen Mulva, the Executive Director of CII.
Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. I hope you enjoyed the beach party last night. I know I did. I'm really glad we were able to take advantage of being here in beautiful San Diego. My talk this morning is about, and it's entitled, Harmonizing Project Delivery and Business Support. You must have both, and they have to be in balance. That's the key message. What we find is that capital projects people, they sweat the details about project delivery, but they tend to ignore business support functions. And this is detailed a little bit on I call it the placemat in front of you. I'm going to talk about that today. And it's pretty busy, so we'll go through that step by step. But in contrast, business managers or business unit leaders, they understand operations, but they tend to undervalue the challenges that are inherent to managing projects. And obviously, this is what you all have experienced. So as a prologue, let me start with a personal story from where I've lived since 2002, and that's in Austin, Texas. Austin is currently the 11th largest city in the country, and it's particularly challenged with public transportation and commuting in particular. In 1986, the city and the Transit Authority bought an unused 162-mile railroad that went from Giddings to Llano, if you sort of know where that is, and they paid $9.3 million for this. Now, this is a single-track, unused freight railroad. In 2000, the city leaders proposed nearly a $2 billion, 52-mile rail transit system with some new right-of-way, and it was roundly rejected by the voters. But in 2004, they proposed what was called the All Systems Go Long-Range Transit Plan, and this featured a 32-mile red line on part of that old freight railroad. As you can see in the table, the project was 3 years late. It was 250% over budget. It has ongoing operational losses to this day of about $12 million a year, and it has 80% fewer riders than was what was in the forecast. So not good. And I'll admit that I'm one of the voters that voted for it. I was one of the 62% of the people who endorsed this plan in 2004. I voted for it because the planners said that a blue line would be added between Austin and San Antonio, and that would include a station halfway in between in the town of San Marcos, where at the time I was teaching at Texas State University. And I'll zoom in, and this was actually the architect's rendering, and you can see the old-looking railroad there. So the day after this election, the owner of this blue line, the freight railroad, and that's Union Pacific. It runs down the middle of Mopac if you've been to Austin. They took out a full-page ad in the Austin newspaper, and it said, "No one from the Transit Authority or the city ever came to them and talked to them about the blue line." And then they added in their newspaper ad that the railroad was already at 100% capacity, and even if they wanted to help, they literally couldn't because of their freight contracts. So that went away. So 3 years ago, and actually, if you visited, well, let me just start by saying I was totally duped by this because I was living in Austin, 41 miles away, and I thought, this is going to be great. I can get to and from work. But anyway, if you visited Austin today, what you'll find out, and you ride on our Red Line commuter rail system, it costs $3.50 to ride. The taxpayers will subsidize your journey for another $24. And of the 30 rail transit systems in the U.S., Austin ranks 22nd for ridership. Now, I don't know who the other 8 are, but given the pathetic performance of the one in Austin, really makes you wonder. So 3 years ago, Forbes wrote an article about the Austin Red Line, and they called it America's leading rail transit failure and a monument to government waste. So despite being in Austin, along with CII, you would be right to conclude that our transit authority, Capital Metro, has never been a member of CII. So by 2014, this is kind of an interesting story, the city leaders said, well, now's the time's right, maybe a decade's passed, we can go out for another $600 million bond issue for another 14 miles of rail to extend out to the airport. And the voters voted that down by a 2-to-1 margin. And after the election, proponents of this plan, which is called Project Connect, they began asking questions about why the bond issue failed. And they said, how important was the cost? How important was the route? How important was the lack of definition of the whole system? And the crazy part of this is the person who's saying this is the leader of the rail transit planning process. And he says, how important was the lack of definition of the whole system? So again, clearly he's never heard of the PDRI for infrastructure. Otherwise, he would have known how to ask some of these questions. So my hypothesis today for you is, how did Austin become America's leading rail transit failure? And my hypothesis has two parts. First of all, I think Capital Metro and the city and the myriad agencies, and there's about 12 of them behind the rail projects, have absolutely an inadequate project delivery system. They have no project definition and no accountability, and I could probably back that up a number of ways. But in fact, the U.S. Department of Transportation, which has some oversight over our rail line, has repeatedly closed it for safety violations. This is and quality reasons, so they call it lack of positive train control. There was actually a point on the 32 miles where the operators had to assume manual control and ignore the signal so that they didn't crash into each other. And there was a lack of interoperability between two different control systems, one that opened the rail crossing gates and one that the operators in the trains themselves saw. So this was a big problem. The second part is these agencies have incapable business systems. They don't talk to each other, and they don't have any effective means to understand customers or taxpayers. So they don't have a CRM system. So the situation really couldn't be worse. And so if my hypothesis is correct about this problem, then what's needed is more than just a project delivery system or a business support. What's needed is harmonization between them. So this creates something known as duality. That is, that there's this tension that exists between two different opposing forces. So think about project systems and business systems, and they have to come together to be a force for change and for creativity. And if you harmonize these different opinions or ideas, you bring them into some kind of agreement. And often this agreement could be amplified. The whole could be better than the sum of the parts. So you can think of this as the yin and yang of project people and business people, that the two have to work together in order to make something happen. Okay, so in front of you, as I mentioned, is this placemat, 11 by 17 piece of cardstock. Let me give you a quick tour of what's on here. So in the middle is our main objective. We're trying to take an idea through to the manifestation of a completed physical facility. And the words on here are important. So agile planning, concurrent design, manufacturing and fabrication, on-site assembly, commissioning and startup. Note that the word construction is not on that. That's actually intentional. And I'll talk more about that later. Above this arrow are the systems and practices that support project delivery, and below are the business practices and the software packages that enable the physical facility to be created. And so these systems are like enterprise resource planning, such as Oracle and SAP, also customer relationship management, HR, supply chain management systems, finance and accounting systems. In today's world, your project will grind to a halt without these systems. And yet we really trivialize, as project people, we really trivialize or ignore them. And at best, we try to just accommodate them. And we complain about them. And that has to change because it's not enough. So since it's clearly not Austin succeeding at Rail Project, who is getting this right? And I've concluded that it's the United Kingdom and their Infrastructure and Projects Authority. I'll note that they also have an IPA acronym. They recently established a a program called TIP, which stands for Transformed Infrastructure Performance. TIP targets better outcomes from infrastructure investment, better services for users, better value for taxpayers. TIP also seeks to embed improved commercial models and approaches that support a productive, innovative, and profitable supply chain. So new commercial models support not just the construction sector, but the wider economy in the UK. Investments being attracted into this, and the competitive advantage of the UK firms is increasing. And this is something that we need to have here and that we're trying to bring to the CII members and beyond. So, all right, now what we're going to do is really take a deeper dive into project delivery. And while this is a world that you all know quite well, I'm going to point out some unique things. And along the way, I'm going to point out what CII is doing and where our strategic initiatives fit into this. Again, our strategic initiatives are fully aligned with and supportive of the strategic initiatives and direction of our member companies that you all are pursuing today. So we're going to start at the very top with research. I'm going to give you this an orientation to the sheet that you have. You really shouldn't be surprised that we're starting with research, because I think CII's research and development has really paced the industry for the last 36 years. This is where a bulk of our industry's improvement comes from. We're definitely all about improving the performance of projects through work process, people, and technology. And we have 17 best practices. 4 of them are listed here. Advanced work packaging, you'll hear more about that later. It's our latest best practice. We still have a research program that's got 3 different research topics just on AWP. So we're doing a lot of that. Now, I'm also going to outline this Transforming Infrastructure Performance program. It has 5 elements. But another part of what they're doing in the UK, and this followed the Brexit vote, the government set aside £4 billion to improve British industry. And they allocated the money through this Innovation and Science Seed Fund. And it was designed to be matched with money from the private sector. So in construction, of the £4 billion, they set aside $170 million to modernize construction through digital design and standardized modular components that are fabricated in factories and brought out for on-site assembly. Sounds a little bit like the gold era that I just talked about, right? And in case you're wondering, yes, we are collaborating with our friends in the UK, because again, I just mentioned they have £170 million for research of construction, so we'd like some of that. So these are a list of the first 4 topics that they're researching. They're shown in the screen in blue, and these sort of validate that we're on the right path at CII. So our Facilities and Healthcare Sector Committee is looking at that first one around life cycle costs and energy usage. Our Technology Committee is studying virtual reality, as you saw yesterday. That's the 4th one. And of course, we have these large overarching research programs in artificial intelligence for advanced work packaging, and this foundational effort to understand and prepare for the workforce of 2030. So they're doing research. Okay, top left corner of the placemat is something up there that you'll see called CII Tools and Product Development. And I'll note that back last October, we created the CII Deployment Committee to develop a comprehensive product out of the multiple past and ongoing research efforts at CII. The committee is basically charged with spanning the divide between research and deployed products in order to create these distinctive and outstanding business results that you're after out of your project. But a product, when I talk about a product, it's more than just an Excel spreadsheet with macros. It's a Fortune 500 level education change management / consulting / software. Fortune 500 level product. And we're partnering right now with service providers, other industry groups like CURT, and consulting firms to get this right. It's important that we get this right. We can't just have research that sits on a shelf. Okay, how do we know that we're going to get a distinctive and an outstanding business result? So in the UK, they're doing now what we've been doing at CII since 1995, and that's benchmarking. The graph on the right, it benchmarks tunneling cross-section, so the cost of tunneling, cross-section cost for transportation and utility tunnels as a function on the x-axis is their length in kilometers. And you'll notice, if you can read the chart there, that utility tunnels, those are shown in yellow, are more expensive than transport tunnels. That was kind of an interesting finding for them. So at CII, in parallel, we have a key strategic initiative underway. I talked about it at the opening yesterday, to modernize our benchmarking system, to create a data lake at the university where you can electronically import, store, analyze, retrieve through data and visualization software, all the data. The approach isn't one-by-one metric. It's data mining a large volume of data, and it's definitely going to be a game changer. So systems such as benchmarking eventually become part of the project delivery platform. And this is indicated at the left side of your placemat. The addition of FIATech into CII at the beginning of 2018 is really enabling the Institute to do a number of things, to deploy its research findings into the practices and the systems used by the members, the technology firms, and the industry to support project delivery. This is pretty important for us. And it's not just software. So part of production in the UK, they identified, this is another part, they identified that smarter infrastructure requires a different approach to production. And note that I didn't say productivity. Productivity is just using basically the same methods while finding ways to achieve higher output. What I'm talking about is a fundamentally different approach to building, to constructing. It's production. So TIP here is talking about bringing new skills into hubs, into cities, away from the construction site and manufacturing the components off-site. And here at CII, we have been fortunate to receive a grant from the Department of Energy and the Rapid Institute to study something called modular chemical process intensification. And the idea of this is we can drive down the cost of increasing capacity in a manufacturing or an industrial plant by manufacturing lots of smaller self-contained plants. So not one big plant, 10 little ones or 20 little ones. The strategy is called numbering up. CII and our downstream and chemicals sector committee are currently studying the economics of this approach. The graph here shows that building bigger isn't always better. And I think we're familiar with the 6/10 factor that says you get economies of scale as you get incredibly large. That's largely been disproven. So we have to study this as a different way of doing production. Now, even at this year's conference, and later today, you'll see the upstream, midstream, and mining sector committee talk about standardization and the benefits of that. And like MCPI, this also could become a critical element in the future of project delivery. So this graph is actually from Independent Project Analysis, another IPA. Their data suggests that from standardization that 14 to 47% cost savings are possible from the use of standard designs for offshore facilities. And that would be 14% for the top sides all the way up to about 47% for flow lines, plus 11% faster schedules. But the really interesting part of this is that they also said the cost growth rates when you use standardization is between 0.88 and 0.85 for projects with great FEP and poor FEP, respectively. Now, 0.88 means that the actual cost of the facility was 88% of the budget. It's actually under budget. That's for poor, great FEP. 0.85 is poor FEP. It's actually the opposite. So to me, what this means is that standardization today for those types of facilities is actually more important than the quality of the front-end planning effort. Poof, that's a different idea as well. Okay, last part of project delivery I'm going to discuss are the practices required for digital delivery. You'll find this at the center of the placemat just above the gold arrow. So in the UK, their TIP program leans heavily on technology. They believe that smart sensors, big data, and artificial intelligence can be exploited to optimize all aspects of design, construction, and operation. And this ties in well with what we're doing at CII. Our technology committee has two strategic initiatives, that being the technology path to the future and the digital structured project delivery. So the first one examines different technologies that exist or are anticipated to come into our industry and others, what their impact might be. The second is really focused on streamlining production. And here I think about moving from digital design and the digital twin, that's also listed alongside the gold arrow, into additive manufacturing. So go right from the 3D model right into additive or 3D printing. And the costs of schedules associated with things we know as like shop drawings, approvals, coordination, these are things of the past. They're going to either be greatly reduced or totally eliminated. And I also believe that CII is really positioned now to be essentially the first group in the world to have a asset delivery process that's completely digital. So asset delivery process, some people also know those as stage gate process. Chevron, I think, has chip dip, and they recently abandoned that in favor of something else. And that progression is going to continue, especially at owner companies. So this part of project delivery, this is the end of the talk of the world that we're all accustomed to and we live in, and I pointed out a few different things. I just wanted to point out here between project people and business people, conversation. So the project person says, essentially they say this, we're a cottage industry that builds prototypes. Everything we do, definition of project, temporary and unique. We build prototypes, we do feed, and we prepare an estimate. And then we often value engineer the result to comply with the whims of our business colleagues. And project people or business people say to this, we set the budget and then we execute it. What's the problem? I don't understand, right? You guys have heard these. Or conversely, project people say, we make a schedule and then we resource load it to find out we don't have enough resources. Business people say, well, what resources do we have? They get this out of their HR system. What does the market require? What is achievable? Oh, look, we just got a new demand forecast, which means throw everything out the window, right? So these are the two worlds that we have to bring together. We have to bring into harmony. So now let me talk about the bottom part of the chart, and this I'll call the case for business support. And I'm going to build the case for why we have to pay attention to the business and the commercial models that we're using in particular. And I've taken a lot of heat on this one for at least 2 years. But then I found this quote recently from Larry Ellison at Oracle, and it said, when you innovate, you have to be prepared for everyone telling you that you're nuts. So I'm like, well, if I'm in company with Larry Ellison, that sounds okay to me. So here we go. So we reached a milestone at CII about a month ago on July 5th. On that day, the University of Texas approved the creation of the operating system 2.0 we call Industrial Affiliates Program. And if I just had to condense OS2 into one sentence, it's really concerned with modernizing and streamlining the business support platform that enables our projects. Full stop. Okay, there are 2 rows of logos. The first row are the companies and the industry groups that have already invested and put money into OS2 research, mostly through the IAP. The second row contains the companies that intend to invest in OS2 and have already budgeted for the funds for this purpose. So this is, when I said yesterday, we're essentially doubling the amount of research that we're able to do. It's through that MCPI to some degree, and to a large degree through OS2. So let me draw attention to the very bottom of the part of the placemat here. So as with project delivery, our path to better business support begins with research, and of course you expect me to say that by now. You'll notice that the best practices that are in here and that are anticipated as outcomes of the OS2 research bear little resemblance to what we saw before in project delivery. So dynamic risk pricing engine, blockchain-enabled smart contracts, real-time supplier verification, in-plant equipment leasing, right? Different types of things. But the objective function of those practices is the degree to which they can streamline the flow of business transaction. So based on research conducted at CII and elsewhere, there are 12 transaction costs that comprise over 40% of an industrial project's cost, actually 41.4%. But the biggest one is this trade credit, and it's shown in pink. And these costs stem from the 74-day, on average, payment cycle between invoice and receipt of funds. Because of the poor financial condition of our supply chain, it's very weak. Companies pay 2.23% per month to finance that 74 days. It's actually 3.4% for 74 days. It's over 26% per year finance charge. You're all paying that. The orange or non-value added field operations is the business cost of low productivity. And at the bottom in yellow are the excess costs paid to move materials around the world on an individual project-by-project basis, not a collective aggregate basis. Building one project one at a time is extremely costly, and there's a lot better ways to approach logistics. Okay, so lower left-hand corner, the OS2 research that we're going to do will enable the tools and the products that will reduce or eliminate this 40% transactional cost problem, right here in the lower left. Generally, this means we're going to focus on improving or changing the business models and the commercial terms and conditions that are in use today. We have to investigate that. That's the next big area. So here again, the TIP program in the UK did a number of things. They're advocating new commercial models which incentivize long-term collaborative approaches based on value added and not just services delivered. They understand that the business and commercial relationships they have will incentivize investment in research and development, innovation and skills, and not simply drive to low initial price. So if you have these kinds of relationships, suppliers begin to understand that their clients have business needs, and the clients understand where their suppliers are coming from. And they're in a conversation not just about the price of the contracted equipment or service. So over the last 7 years, the Center for Construction Law at King's College in London has developed a multi-party and multi-project framework alliance contract, which is known as FAC1. It's been used on highway and building projects all over the UK, and it's based on these 5 aspects, and overall it has saved 15% of the cost of these projects. It's a true success. So again, different business support for projects. Another thing that they did is, and this is a possible OS2 product, is a project bank account. So this is a bank account with what's called trust status, used to make payments to suppliers while providing protection to beneficiaries in the case of insolvency. So a couple years ago, the UK's second largest contractor, Carillion, went bankrupt without paying most of their trade partners and suppliers. And this caused job losses, and it was a big mess in the UK. So today, they require PBAs, project bank accounts, for all public projects over £2 or £4 million sterling. And you can see it in the various different countries. So the project bank account serves as an effective mechanism for establishing fair payment to the construction supply chain. And another benefit of this is the speed and the transparency of payments and the security of payments in the case of an upstream failure. It's resulted in a lienless project. These projects have no liens. So again, big cost savings. The thing that I'm showing here, the strategic initiative that we have at CII, it says C-suite engagement. This is because we've determined that project delivery or business support product like a PBA cannot be deployed without executive support. So we have to involve them. And we haven't been good at leveraging across all levels of our companies. So products such as FAC1 and project bank accounts will really impact the corporate business software systems in use. We take a look at here now the middle part of the lower portion of the placemat. And earlier I talked about the fact that these systems were typically found within enterprise resource planning systems like Oracle and SAP. And they're in use with most major companies. But in ERP, business functionality is typically provided through a number of discrete and different modules like accounting, purchasing, supply chain management, product planning, human resources. So one example of this, again from the UK, the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, they said, we have 10,000 openings for project managers over the next decade. And they realized this problem couldn't be solved one project at a time. Sound familiar? So recruitment is a business support function. And the authority leaned on their HRM, their human resources management system, to coordinate and manage a very effective public relations campaign, and you see one of the ads here. What it says basically is, who wouldn't want to help positively impact the lives of 65 million UK citizens? especially for millennials and people just entering the workforce. This campaign absolutely hits the mark. That's a demographic that cares deeply about making a difference. So in the red, you see, be part of it. Be part of something large. Be part of something that impacts 65 million people. Okay, so the last section of this, take a look at the green arrow on the left side. What you'll see here is that the business software we just discussed helps form and comprise a business platform to enable capital projects. And what's on this platform need to be the best of breed practices that we can use to rein in this 41% transactional cost problem. Okay, final example. This is around alignment and integration, also from the UK. By the way, I grew up in England till I was 12 years old, so I have this affinity to always watch what's going on there. But our final example is from the Institution of Civil Engineers. And in line with the 5th strategy for TIP around alignment and integration, Project 13 is from the Institution of Civil Engineers. It's an owner's approach, modernizing business practices in a more collaborative way. So many of the largest infrastructure owners in the UK, Heathrow Airport and high-speed rail, are using the Project 13 they call Blueprint and Commercial Handbook to move from transactions to high-performing enterprises / high-performing companies. They're shown in those little diagrams there, or those are the covers of the booklets. So at CII, alignment and integration, in particular, our goals of our integrated and collaborative delivery research program, which just launched its first team in January. Alignment and integration are also at the heart of our deployment committee strategic initiative around what we call Deployment Product 1. And the committee's still figuring out exactly what that is, but I think it'll probably be some compilation of a lot of different CI research products. So you could have 30 different research products come into one product, such as a comprehensive view of pre-FID project assurance or something of that nature. Okay, so this morning, as I started, I used the TIP program and its 5 elements basically as a framework for my talk. Clearly, these are elements that are of interest to our membership and the industry at large. But in fact, if you take a look, we've got really good alignment between these 5 elements in CII's research and strategic initiatives. And so like TIP, CII also seeks to embed improved commercial approaches to support a productive and innovative and productive or profitable supply chain. Better business support also enables a few other things: improved decisions on what to prioritize, where and how to build, has a clarity of life cycle costs, performance, and the wider benefits to society and customers. And I think long-term this attracts more investment into our industry, into the companies who are here, and that's absolutely critical. So my question is, do you want to be a part of it? It takes people to get from an idea to implementation. It also takes a project delivery process and technology, along with great business support, to get from an idea to manifestation. The operation of a valued facility. It takes all of these things. So now the epilogue. And one question: what will the future of regional transportation look like in Central Texas? By the way, I've kind of committed to just driving a car, but anyway. That's because this is what the project planners on Project Connect currently have in mind. We want to increase the speed of the Amtrak train that runs once a day between San Antonio and Austin. It takes 2.5 hours. It goes at averages 32 miles an hour. They want to kind of straighten out the rail line and make it go 90 miles an hour. And they thought, well, maybe more than once a day. We could go twice a day. And my question to you is that enough? You know, the planning process, these regional authorities, no project delivery system, no business support. Is this going to be enough? I don't think so. Not when the UK is demonstrating that it can be successful in undertaking infrastructure projects, and not when Virgin is going 300 miles an hour in a dedicated Hyperloop tunnel. I think you have to have a bigger vision. I think you have to have the right project delivery and the right business support. So we can do more. We will do more. We're going to do that here at CII. But I think the key to this is harmonizing project delivery and business support. So I thank you for your attention, and I welcome any questions you all have.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much. We do have some questions for you, and I'll start with, let's go with a couple at least. How will this OS2 be developed, and how can CI companies get involved?
So OS2, as I mentioned, we've got some funding already, and we're starting a bunch of research projects, but they're involving different sets of faculty than normal. We're definitely still involving engineering faculty, but a lot of business, accounting, organizational behavior, law school, and we can obviously use more people to get involved. One of the key things that our executive committee at CII recognized here is, we're able to bring this business support research to the CII community. That was a key part of it. So even if CII members aren't directly involved in paying for OS2, we're still going to be able to disseminate the findings from OS2 back to the CII community. So you can get involved just by being a CII member. You can get involved by actually being part of the OS2 effort, and there's a number of different ways to do that.
Okay, and the follow-up question would be, what is the expected timeline of this development?
We're looking at 2.5 to 3 years to complete the initial set of investigations. There's essentially about 7 key areas that we're studying. I touched on some of them here. So in-plant equipment leasing and a number of instant supplier verification and a number of other things.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess one last question is, can this presentation be made available?
So actually this morning I talked to Michael Burns, and he said he's going to post it the second. So as soon as I come off the stage, he's going to post it. So then you all have it.
Another question we have, and I think we still have time, is the relationship within this and Prairie Dog. Is that a different thing or a similar thing?
They're related. They're collaborating together. Prairie Dog is a startup company, and it's backed with the support of the Construction Users Roundtable, and they're existing to create a business platform to do the streamlining of the transaction costs that I talked about. But let me be clear that CII is involved, and the IAP, the Industrial Affiliates Program for OS2, the research part is under the CII umbrella, and we're strictly on the research side. Prairie Dog, as a startup, has the intention of creating the platform. So we're collaborating, but they're 2 discrete efforts.
Okay. Stephen, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you all.